Hey guys, now listen up. Not here today, so you figured you won't have to hear me, see me, or listen to me. You're probably all excited about that. However, I couldn't do that to you. So what I did is this: is that I recorded a lecture for today. What we're going to do is talk about the technology people use to get out west, the motivation people use to get out west, and then we're going to talk about that a little bit, just touch on the impact of Native Americans because we're going to talk about it predominantly tomorrow. And you're going to need to make sure you get to that DBQ today so we can discuss that tomorrow. Okay? And so as you're going through this, I want you to think about a few things. I want you to think about why the sudden rush, what made it possible for people to move so quickly out west. I mean, if you think how long it took to settle the East Coast, and then how long it took to settle the Louisiana Purchase territories, and how long it took to settle out west, what was the motivational differences? Okay, why? And what technology spurred this on? There was two key pieces of technology. One I don't mention in the lecture, but I'm going to mention now, is that the telegraph. Don't underestimate the importance of communication. One of the problems Spain had with its territories in this part before the not Spain, excuse me, Mexico had with its territories that the U.S. took over is it had problems communicating. The U.S. had the telegraph. The telegraph was able the U.S. to manage its territories very quickly. If they were attacked, they knew about it immediately. If Gold struck, the whole country found out so quickly. And so don't underestimate the importance of small pieces of technology like the telegraph. So as you listen, think about it, okay? And think about the guiding questions I just told you. What drove people out there? What technology enabled this to happen so quickly? Um, and um, and anything else that pushed these people forward. And what does it say about conditions for in the eastern U.S. for people to give up everything they had to move out west? Now, also, is this wasn't people from the east, white people from the east moving out west. It was also African Americans who were freed from slavery or who were escaping slavery heading out west, trying to set up um, new homes out there and escape the discrimination of the past. They were called exodusters, and and also you had immigrants who built the railroads from China, from Ireland, who also settled the area. So the West was taking a different look to it than the East was, and you need to keep this in mind as you're watching the PowerPoint I made. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and you take care. Talking about the period of Western expansion, the Mexican American War was won. Americans started moving into the lands that they conquered. And what we're going to focus on in this lecture is what made this possible, the impact upon the Native Americans, and we're going to be focusing on the impact of slavery and the march toward the Civil War. During this lecture, you're going to have to take notes and submit them after you finish watching the lecture. The notes are going to be worth 30 points, so that's an easy 30 points for you to do. Just do the stuff, get the points, and everybody's happy. Now what we're going to, let's look at the big ideas. All right, we're looking at, like I said, examining period between 1801 and 1806. We're going to look at the people who immigrated, not only the white people who moved from the East Coast, but also the African Americans, the Chinese immigrants, as well as the impact on Native Americans. Now, we're also going to take a look at the technologies that allowed people to move to out west, and we're going to look at them from the perspective of the impact on the environment as well as the impact on movement and communication and on the development of society as a whole. Um, we're also going to focus too on this last thing of this, touch on the difference between the North and the South, with the North being predominantly industrialized and the South being predominantly agricultural and slave based. Remember, as we're talking about this, we talked about in the past the need for slavery to have a continuous expansion, and this movement westward westward was necessary for the survival of slavery from the standpoints of the southern plantation owners. Now, as we're getting started, let's take a look at the expansion um, of the United States to the West, and it did not start in the 1860s or 1850s. It started back with the Louisiana Purchase back in 1803. And what you see in the red is the U.S. after basically the Revolution. And the march west from the East Coast to the West began, really, if you think about it, and pretty much immediately following the Revolution, because the Louisiana Purchase was 1803. They did Lewis and Clark. They explored the area. People moved into the area, and it was the Louisiana Purchase, if you remember, that exposed some of the issues with the difference between slave and free states, because one of the issues that came up with the Louisiana Purchase is when the new states come in, are they going to be slave or free? Now, the next big expansions came both through treaty and conquest. Florida was given to U.S. by the treaty with Spain. Texas was annexed after gaining independence. Oregon and was decided on by a treaty between U.S. and Great Britain. And California, as well as Utah and Nevada, was taken during the American and Mexican-American War. Now, if you take a look at the map, the history of expansion is a continuous string up to the 1860s, and it's a continuous moving westward. It's not just one U.S. period, because a lot of history books said Western expansion, and that's what they like to entitle this particular unit. But if you look at the map, Western expansion has been occurring in U.S. history since the beginning. And it was this period in history where the West was becoming more and more populated because of people moving from east to west. Now the question becomes, what factors was pushing people west, and what helped them get west? Because we're talking thousands of miles people were moving. What was pushing people west was this availability of land, the huge population growth, great economic opportunity, especially during the gold rush and farming and logging, cheaper transportation and faster transportation, and the knowledge of trails and how to get west was a big issue and one of the big motivation factors, because a train could take somebody to California very quickly at the time. Okay, but what was really pushing, and it's sort of like an ideological motivation, was this concept of manifest destiny. This concept that we have to keep pushing west, we have to keep pushing west. But more than this manifest destiny theory, what was driving people west was, quite frankly, economic opportunity, the chance to own your own land, the chance to get rich striking gold, the chance to start your business. And what enabled people to get out there was trains, was the steamboat, was the prairie wagon, the schooners. All these things was what gradually made Western movement so easy, affordable, and all of a sudden so doable. And let's talk about some of the inventions that made it possible. And believe it or not, one of the inventions that made it possible was the cotton gin. The cotton gin made slavery economical again and made farming farming cotton so much more easier. Because if people used to have to remove the seeds from the cottons by hand, if you see the white little balls, that's the cotton. Those white little balls had little bitty seeds inside. It took hundreds of people to take those seeds out and make the cotton usable. But the cotton gin, one person can do that. So the cotton gin made cotton farming economical, which then drove people out west to start cotton farming. Okay, so just keep that in mind. This little invention called the cotton gin, which you wouldn't think that would make people motivated to move, actually did, because it made cotton farming cheaper, more efficient. It made slavery cheaper and more efficient, and therefore more people wanted to grow cotton in order to prove their living, in order to make a living. It's quite ironic too that the guy who invented this cotton gin thought it would end slavery, but in actuality the cotton gin made slavery more affordable and actually saved slavery. So that's one of the reasons people moved out west, because it was now cheap to make cotton. Same thing with the wheat reaper. The reaper increased productivity in harvesting um, wheat and other grain crops. And so that was another motivating factor for people heading out west. But the most important factors was the steam engine. And first, let's talk about the steamboat. The steamboat made going up a river against currents possible, made traveling around to California by water possible and much more quicker. You can now get to California in 100 days, which was remarkable back then. And the steam engine, as it was applied to the steamboat, revolutionized the transportation industry, because now you can go up the Mississippi, not just down. Because think how strong a river current could be. Before the invention of the steam engine, you couldn't go upstream very quickly. Now you could on a steamboat. And this had more people and helped more people to move out west, and helped more people to move out west much, much more quicker than ever was possible in the past. Now let's talk about the steam engine and the railroads. The railroads brought millions of people out to settle in the West. It did it much more safely and much more quicker. It also enabled products to be moved quickly from the West to the East and from the East to the West. And it helped with communication. It made travel safer. The application of the steam engine was probably one of the most founding and one of the most important reasons for the settlement of the West, and was the number one reason for how quickly it was settled. Even though great numbers of people moved by wagon train, think of how long it took a wagon train to cross country. It could be months, 2 months. It took a choo-choo train maybe a week or two. What it took a wagon train a month or two to do. It took a boat, a steamboat, 100 days. And both, it was safer to move out west on a train. It was quicker to move out west a train. You can haul resources from the west to the east and finish good from the east to the west. The invention of the train and the railroad tracks was one of the most transforming events in the history of the settlement of the West, because people got out there quicker and in such large numbers that it transformed the culture out west immensely and quickly, almost at a shocking pace. And also, what the building of the railroads did, it brought many Irish as well as Mexican and Chinese immigrants out west who were brought in to work on the railroads. And that further diversified the area and the people of the area. And these immigrants, Irish, Mexican, Chinese, who built the railroad, were treated very, very poorly. Many thousands died in the building of the railroad due to lack of safety precautions and whatnot. But it was these building of the railroad and the people who actually built the railroads that made the settlement of the West not only possible, but so much more quicker. But if you just look at how long it took the Louisiana Territory to get filled up, which was about 50 to 60 years or so, or probably closer to 100, well, not really 100, probably about 50 to 60 years, it took half that time to settle the West because of these new modes of transportation. And the people who put these modes of transportation into place, like the Chinese, like the Irish, also settled out west. And it created an extremely diverse culture and diverse group of people. And it made the West look a lot different from the South, and predominantly a lot different from the South. And so, the impact of the railroads, not only in the movement of people, but in the social makeup, was huge. Okay? These railroads spurred industries growth, spurred industry, spurred settlement. The coal industry grew. Coal was needed to fuel the train. Um, but not only coal, but other industries grew because the need for finished goods that the trains needed to operate. The steel industry grew because they needed rails for the trains. The lumber industry grew because they needed tracks. Cities grew um, where major stops were along the choo-choo train's route. Um, Many of the biggest cities today started off as small towns on the route of these railroads. So railroads not only brought people, it brought economic development. It spurred the growth of industries. It spurred the growth of cities and towns. Watering stations became cities. Coal stations became cities. Industries were started and grown and transformed by the need for finished goods by the railroads. The railroads were the key to development of the West, not only because they moved people, but they spurred economic growth, both directly and indirectly. We've talked about how people got out west. Let's talk about some of the reasons why they moved out west. And one of the big reasons was the California Gold Rush of 1849. You might have heard them as the um, miner 49ers who went out to California to try to strike at Wicks. You had the Constab lode in Nevada. You had a lot of gold being found out there, and there was different methods to finding the gold. Some was panned, some was mined. These gold mines attracted people from all over the world, immigrants from Mexico, from Europe, from China. Most immigrants were treated fairly poorly, worked extremely hard, but these immigrants would settle and would make a new culture out west. That's all will end up being very, very different from the culture back east. But a great motivation was this desire to get to California and to strike it rich. Thousands of people left everything they have, jobs and everything else, just to strike it rich in one of the gold fields, which also told you when people are willing to leave something established like a home in the East and travel out west, it tells you how tough it was in the East and how these people were desperate for success. And so gold and the gold rush played a huge, huge factor in motivation for people to settle. But for African Americans, the move west offered a chance for freedom, to escape slavery, to escape Jim Crow's laws. And many African Americans, it's called the Exodus, and many African Americans went out west to try to leave behind slavery, start something new. And indeed, there were many, many successful African American towns that were started out west. And some of these towns survived, some didn't because of discrimination from white towns. But many, many African Americans left, attempted to leave slavery and racism behind, and attempted to basically start something new with their lives, away from everything they've known, and to make a go of it. What also attracted people out west was this new act passed by Congress called the Homestead Act of 1862. And the Homestead Act basically gave people land. They could stake out up to 200-300 acres, as long as they cultivated the acres for 5 years, then they get the land for free. And a lot of people just couldn't pass up this economic opportunity offered by the government, and they were rushing out there to grab the free land as quickly as they could. And this Homestead Act of 1862, this was a large motivation in moving out west. People talk a lot about manifest destiny. But it's practical things like this that drove people west. It was ability to make money. It was ability to strike it west. It was ability to get 200 or 300 acres of land and be able to support your family without working in a factory. That was the realistic things that motivated people to go west. Yeah, manifest destiny, the upper class would have subscribed to, or maybe somebody, a newspaper would talk about. But what motivated the common person was the Homestead Act, was the chance to be free African American. It was a chance to earn a living or strike it rich that caused people to move out west in such great large numbers and leave everything they knew behind. And the lands that people were moving in into out west were already occupied by Native Americans. And I'm going to touch on the subject of Native American resistance in this end of this video, but the main part of this is coming tomorrow in your DBQs in our class discussion. Um, Native Americans resisted fiercely the movement out west. General Grant called the resistance some of the best resistance he's ever seen, some of the most organized. Um, Native American nations on the plains fought bravely on the back of their horses. They fought. They used rear guard motions as well as flank attacks. Very advanced tactical strategies. Um, they scored some victories, and particularly during the defeat of General Custer at Little Bighorn. But in the end, the U.S. firepower overcame the Native American nations. The U.S. had signed many treaties. And an example I like to point out is the Fort Leonard Treaty, where made with the Cheyenne, where they said the land was theirs forever. However, once gold was found, the U.S. has pushed the treaty aside and took the land away. And this was a pattern of broken promises with Native American tribes, particularly in the central U.S. section. And we're going to be looking into those tomorrow. Um, Several battles were fought across the U.S. were fought. The Sioux War, City Boring, Crazy Horse, the Apache War was with Geronimo, Little Bighorn, Nez Perce with Chief Joseph out in to the West Coast, and all these battles were fought well and bravely, but in the end, the U.S. would end up pushing Native Americans into reservations, and where they were forced to stay. And we're going to pick up from there tomorrow. That wasn't so bad, and really, it wasn't that bad. And I'm glad you made it to this part of the process. Now, what I want you to do is you're going to take the notes and make a little outline and submit it. Now, on the bottom of your outline, you're going to answer these questions first. What was the primary, what was not the primary, but what was the motivations for moving out west? What was the motivations for moving out west? Second, what technologies enabled Western movement to occur quicker and more efficiently? Okay, what technologies, and include in it, I mentioned earlier, the telegraph and stuff like that. Third, what impact did the railroads have? And I'm talking total impact, not the speed of settlement. How did the railroads help develop many industries? Okay, explain that. All right, and talk about diversity out west. Okay, because the diversity is a big factor out west even today. When you look back to the east and you compare it to the west, all right, look at the groups who settled and list those. And finally, we're talking about the Native American impact tomorrow, but based on the information presented, what was the predominant impact upon the Native Americans, particularly of the Great Plains? And I thank you for making it this far. And if and I'll see you tomorrow. Got any questions, just let me know. Thank you now. And have a great day. And let me see what else. I don't know. have a great day, and I'll talk to y'all later.